I was sitting in that sterile law office, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Dad, and my hands started trembling before I even answered. His voice cracked through the speaker like breaking glass. "Jason, son, you have to help me and Marcus. If you do not lie in court, your father and your half-brother are going to prison." I stared out the window at storm clouds gathering over downtown San Francisco, feeling like those dark masses perfectly matched what was brewing in my chest. 25 years old, and I thought I had left all the family drama behind in Detroit. But Marcus, my 19-year-old half-brother, had this way of dragging everyone into his chaos. Before I tell you what happened that night that changed everything, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button if you have ever been stuck between family loyalty and doing what is right. Subscribe for more real stories that will keep you up at night thinking. Now let me take you back to where this whole nightmare began. The thing about fractured families is that the cracks never really heal. They just get painted over. My dad David was 48, a mechanic who ran a small auto shop on the outskirts of Detroit. His hands were always stained with motor oil, and his heart was always heavy with regret about how things fell apart with Mom. When I was 12, my parents divorced in one of those messy separations where lawyers got rich and kids got therapy. Mom Jennifer packed us up and moved to California for a marketing job at a tech company. She said it was a fresh start, but I think she just wanted to put as many miles as possible between herself and the life that had disappointed her. 2 years later, Dad married Linda, a woman who worked at the local diner and had this way of making everything about her. She was not mean exactly, but she had this cold efficiency that made me feel like a visitor in what used to be my home. When Marcus came along, I watched from California as Dad got his second chance at fatherhood. Every summer, I would fly back to Detroit to spend time with Dad. Those visits were awkward dances around the new family dynamic. Linda would set the table for four, but somehow make it feel like I was the extra chair. Marcus was cute when he was little, all gap-toothed grins and superhero pajamas, but even then there were signs. When Marcus was 7 and I was 13, I caught him going through my wallet during one of those summer visits. He had taken a $20 bill, claiming he found it on the ground. Dad just ruffled his hair and said, "Kids do silly things." When Marcus was 10, he broke my iPod and blamed it on the neighbor's dog. Again, Dad made excuses. It was always something with Marcus, and Dad was always there to smooth it over. The pattern continued as Marcus got older. At 16, I came for Christmas break and found empty beer cans hidden under his bed. When I told Dad, he said Marcus was just experimenting like all teenagers do. But it was not just beer. I started noticing other things during my visits. Marcus would disappear for hours without explanation. He always had more cash than a part-time job at the local pizza place could provide. His eyes were often bloodshot, and he had developed this nervous habit of constantly checking his phone. Last spring, during what would turn out to be my final family visit, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. I was using Marcus's laptop to check my email when I accidentally opened his browser history. Page after page of online gambling sites, cryptocurrency exchanges, and something called encrypted messaging apps that I had never heard of. When I confronted him, Marcus just shrugged and said he was learning about investments. But the real shock came when I was walking to the corner store and saw Marcus behind the high school exchanging small packages with older guys who definitely were not students. The way they looked around nervously, the quick handoff, the thick roll of cash, Marcus shoved into his pocket afterward. I knew exactly what I was witnessing. That night, I sat Dad down and told him everything. I expected anger, concern, maybe even gratitude that I was looking out for Marcus. Instead, Dad got defensive. He said I was jealous of Marcus, that I was trying to cause problems because I could not handle not being the only son anymore. Those words cut deeper than any physical wound ever could. The call that shattered my carefully constructed adult life in San Francisco came on a Tuesday morning in October. I was debugging code for a client when Dad's number flashed on my screen. His voice was barely recognizable, thick with tears and desperation. "Jason, they arrested us. Both Marcus and me. They are saying we were running money through the shop, cleaning cash for some drug dealers downtown." The words tumbled out of him like water through a broken dam. Marcus could get 5 to 8 years, and they are talking 10 to 15 for me because I own the business. My coffee went cold as Dad explained how federal agents had raided the auto shop at dawn, seizing computers files and thousands of dollars in cash that Marcus had apparently been storing in Dad's office safe. Marcus, now 19, and legally, an adult, was being charged as the primary organizer of what prosecutors were calling a sophisticated money laundering operation. The only way we can beat this is if you testify that Marcus was being threatened, that he was forced into this by criminals who were using him, Dad pleaded. The lawyer says, if we can prove Marcus was a victim, not a willing participant, we might be able to get the charges reduced or dropped entirely. I felt sick. Dad, I live in California. I was not there. I did not see any threats. But you could say you did. His voice dropped to a whisper. You could say that back in March when you visited, you witnessed some gang members threatening Marcus behind the school. You could say they forced him to use the shop for their illegal activities. The line went quiet, except for Dad's ragged breathing. 3,000 miles away, I was supposed to make a decision that would either save my family or destroy my integrity. Within an hour of hanging up, my phone started ringing nonstop. First, Linda sobbing so hard I could barely understand her words. She had sold their house, maxed out credit cards, and taken out a second mortgage on the auto shop to pay for legal fees. The family she had worked 20 years to build was crumbling, and I was apparently the only one who could stop it. Jason, I know you and I have never been close. Linda's voice cracked with exhaustion. I know I was not the stepmother you deserved. But please, I am begging you, do not let this family fall apart. Marcus made mistakes, but he is just a kid who got in over his head. Then came the aunts, uncles, and family friends, all of them with the same message delivered in slightly different words. How could I be so selfish? How could I let Dad go to prison when I had the power to save him? Did I not owe him anything? After all the years he supported me, each call felt like another weight added to my chest. By evening, I could barely breathe under the pressure of their expectations and my own guilt. These were people who had watched me take my first steps, who had cheered at my high school graduation, who had sent me care packages during college. Now they were asking me to commit perjury to save my family. That night, I booked a red-eye flight to Detroit. If I was going to make this decision, I needed to understand exactly what Marcus had gotten himself and Dad into. I needed to look my half-brother in the eye and hear his version of events before I decided whether to lie for him in federal court. The Detroit I returned to felt smaller and grayer than I remembered. The auto shop was wrapped in yellow police tape, and newspaper reporters were camped outside Dad's house. I checked into a motel near the airport and started making phone calls to people from my past. Marcus's former classmates painted a picture that was both worse and more complicated than I had imagined. According to Tommy Rodriguez, who had graduated with Marcus last year, my half-brother had not been some innocent kid manipulated by hardened criminals. Marcus had been recruiting other teenagers to help move money through various businesses around town, taking a percentage of every transaction. Your brother was smart about it, Tommy told me over coffee at a diner that used to be our hangout spot. He never touched the drugs directly, just moved the cash. He convinced a bunch of us that it was easy money, that we were just helping local businesses with their accounting. But the most damaging revelation came from Sarah Chen, a girl who had briefly dated Marcus' junior year. She told me that Marcus had bragged about manipulating Dad into the scheme by claiming the auto shop was failing financially and needed additional revenue streams to survive. Marcus showed me spreadsheets he had created, fake numbers that made it look like your dad's business was about to go under, Sarah explained. He said your dad was too proud to admit he was struggling, so Marcus had to find creative ways to help without making David feel like a failure. The truth was uglier than I had prepared myself to handle. Marcus had not been coerced or threatened. He had been the architect of his own criminal enterprise, and he had manipulated our father's love and concern into complicity. The Wayne County Jail was everything I had expected and somehow worse. Gray concrete walls, the smell of industrial disinfectant mixed with human desperation, and the constant background noise of voices echoing through metal corridors. I sat across from Marcus, in the visiting room, separated by scratched plexiglass, speaking through phones that made everything sound hollow and distant. Marcus looked older than his 19 years. His usually perfect hair was messy, and the orange jumpsuit made his skin look sallow. But his eyes still held that same defiant spark I remembered from childhood, the look that said the world was wrong and he was the victim of circumstances beyond his control. I knew you would come, he said, leaning back in his plastic chair like we were catching up at a coffee shop instead of a jail. Dad said you might not help us, but I told him you are not that cold. Family is family, right? I studied my brother's face, looking for some sign of remorse or understanding of the gravity of what he had done. Instead, I saw the same boy who had stolen from my wallet and broken my belongings without ever taking responsibility. Marcus, I know the truth, I said quietly. I know you were not threatened or coerced. I know you started this whole thing and dragged Dad into it. For just a moment, his mask slipped. I saw fear flicker across his features before the arrogance returned. You do not understand the pressure I was under, he said, his voice rising. Do you know what it is like being compared to perfect Jason your whole life? Dad always talking about how successful you are, how proud he is of your job in California, how you never caused him any trouble. The words hit me like physical blows. All those years I had thought Marcus was Dad's favorite, the son who got all the attention and forgiveness. But apparently he had seen it differently. So I had to prove myself. Marcus continued. I had to show Dad that I could be successful too, that I could solve problems and make money and be someone he could brag about. The guys I was working with, they said it was just business, just moving numbers around on paper. You could have gotten Dad killed, I said, my voice barely controlled. Do you understand that money laundering is not a game? The people you were working with, they do not just write bad Yelp reviews when business partnerships go wrong. Marcus's expression hardened. If you do not testify for us, I will make sure Dad knows that his precious oldest son chose to let his family rot in prison rather than tell one little lie. I will make sure he knows that when we needed you most, you turned your back on us. The threat was delivered with such casual cruelty that I almost admired its effectiveness. Marcus had learned to weaponize guilt and family obligation with surgical precision. Even facing serious prison time, he was still trying to manipulate everyone around him. I left that visiting room feeling like I needed a shower, but also with a strange sense of clarity. Marcus was not going to change. Prison might teach him to be more careful, but it would not teach him to take responsibility for his choices or consider how those choices affected other people. The next morning, I met with Robert Patterson, the lawyer Linda had hired with money they did not have. Patterson was in his mid-50s with silver hair and the kind of expensive suit that suggested he usually handled white-collar crime for clients who could afford his rates. Let me be very clear about what you are considering, Patterson said, leaning forward across his mahogany desk. Perjury in federal court is a felony. If you lie under oath and get caught, you are looking at potential prison time yourself. Your career would be over. Your future would be destroyed. He pulled out a thick folder and spread photographs across the desk. Surveillance photos of Marcus meeting with known criminals' bank records, showing suspicious cash deposits, phone records, documenting hundreds of calls to numbers associated with drug trafficking organizations. The federal prosecutors have built a strong case, Patterson continued. Your testimony about alleged threats might create reasonable doubt, but if they can prove you lied, then your father and Marcus will face additional charges for witness tampering and conspiracy to obstruct justice. Instead of helping them, you could make everything worse. Patterson had handled dozens of similar cases over his 30-year career. He had seen families destroyed by well-meaning relatives who thought they could outsmart federal investigators. The truth, he explained, had a way of surfacing no matter how carefully people tried to bury it. My professional advice is to encourage your father and half-brother to accept plea bargains, he said. Marcus might get 3 to 4 years instead of 6 to 8. Your father might get 5 to 6 instead of 10 to 15. It is not the outcome anyone wants, but it is better than rolling the dice at trial and losing everything. That night alone in my motel room, I called Mom in California. Jennifer had remarried a few years after the divorce, and her new husband, Rick, was a kind man who treated me like his own son. They had built a stable, honest life together, and talking to Mom reminded me what healthy relationships actually looked like. Sweetheart, I know this is tearing you apart, Mom said after I explained the situation. But sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's destructive behavior, even when that someone is family. She told me about her own struggles with her alcoholic brother, how the family had spent years covering for his mistakes and making excuses for his behavior. It was not until they stopped protecting him from the consequences of his choices that he finally got the help he needed. Your father and Marcus got themselves into this situation through their own decisions, Mom said gently. You lying in court will not fix the underlying problems that led them there. It will just teach them that there are no real consequences for their actions, as long as they can manipulate the people who love them. As I hung up the phone, I realized that my decision had been made somewhere during the course of our conversation. I was not going to lie in federal court. I was not going to risk my own future to enable Marcus's manipulation or Dad's willful blindness to his younger son's criminal behavior. The hardest part was not making the decision. The hardest part was living with the knowledge that my choice would send two people I loved to prison. The federal courthouse in downtown Detroit was an imposing building of gray stone and tall windows that seemed designed to intimidate anyone who walked through its doors. I wore my best suit, the navy blue one I had bought for job interviews after college, and tried to project confidence I did not feel. The courtroom was smaller than I had expected, with wooden benches that reminded me uncomfortably of church pews. Dad sat at the defendant's table in an ill-fitting suit Linda had bought at a discount store. He looked older than his 48 years, his hair grayer, his shoulders stooped with the weight of his circumstances. Marcus sat beside him, clean-shaven, and trying to look younger than his 19 years, probably hoping the jury would see him as a misguided teenager rather than a calculating criminal. When the prosecutor called my name, I walked to the witness stand on unsteady legs. The bailiff held out a Bible, and I placed my left hand on its worn leather cover while raising my right hand to swear that I would tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. The prosecutor was a woman in her 30s named Amanda Price, with short brown hair and the kind of sharp intelligence that probably made defense attorneys lose sleep. She asked me about my relationship with Marcus, about my visits to Detroit, about whether I had ever witnessed my half-brother being threatened or coerced by criminal associates. No, I said, my voice stronger than I had expected. I never witnessed Marcus being threatened by anyone. During my visits, Marcus appeared to be making his own decisions about his activities and associations. I heard Linda gasp from the gallery behind me. When I glanced over at the defendant's table, Dad was staring at me with an expression I had never seen before. Not anger exactly, but a kind of profound disappointment that made my chest feel hollow. Marcus would not look at me at all. He kept his eyes fixed on the table in front of him, his jaw clenched tight. The defense attorney tried to shake my testimony during cross-examination, suggesting that I might have been mistaken, or that I might not have witnessed everything that happened during my brief visits. But I stuck to the truth. I had not seen threats. I had not seen coercion. What I had seen was a young man making increasingly poor choices and a father who refused to hold him accountable. The trial continued for 3 more days without me. I flew back to San Francisco before the verdict was announced, but the news reached me through a text message from Patterson. Marcus received 6 years in federal prison. Dad got 8 years because the judge considered his role as a business owner to be an aggravating factor. Linda sent me a single text message after the sentencing. I hope you can live with yourself, knowing you destroyed this family. Then she blocked my number. The silence from Dad's side of the family was deafening. Aunts and uncles who had begged me to save the family now acted like I had never existed. Christmas cards stopped coming. Birthday calls ended. It was as if 25 years of relationships had been erased by a single decision to tell the truth in court. For months afterward, I struggled with guilt and second-guessing. Had I been too rigid in my principles, could I have found a middle ground that saved my family without compromising my integrity? Late at night, staring at the ceiling of my San Francisco apartment, I wondered if I had chosen abstract concepts, like honesty and justice, over the flesh and blood people who had raised me. The turning point came almost a year later when I received an unexpected letter forwarded through Patterson's office. Dad had written from federal prison, and his words were nothing like what I had expected. Jason, I have had a lot of time to think about what happened and why it happened. For years I made excuses for Marcus because I felt guilty about the divorce, about the way my choices affected you boys. I thought being a good father meant protecting Marcus from consequences, but I realize now that I was actually preventing him from learning how to make better decisions. The letter continued for 3 pages, with Dad taking responsibility for his own choices, while acknowledging that my testimony had probably saved the family from even worse outcomes. If I had lied and been caught, as he now understood was likely, the additional charges could have meant decades in prison instead of years. I am proud of you for having the courage to do what was right, even when it was hard, Dad wrote. I hope someday Marcus will understand that you were trying to help him grow up, not destroy his life. Marcus never wrote. According to Dad's subsequent letters, my half-brother remained convinced that I had betrayed the family out of jealousy and spite. He spent his prison time associating with other inmates who reinforced his belief that he was a victim of an unfair system rather than someone who needed to change his behavior. But Dad's perspective continued to evolve during his incarceration. He started attending education programs, earned his GED, and began working in the prison library. His letters described a growing understanding of how his parenting choices had contributed to Marcus's sense of entitlement and lack of accountability. As for me, I started volunteering at a youth center in San Francisco, working with teenagers who were at risk of making the same kinds of choices Marcus had made. It was not exactly therapy, but helping other young people think through the long-term consequences of their decisions gave me a sense of purpose that helped balance the guilt I still carried. I learned that loving someone sometimes means refusing to enable their self-destructive behavior, even when they interpret that refusal as abandonment or betrayal. I learned that families can be rebuilt on foundations of honesty and accountability, but only if everyone is willing to do the hard work of growth and change. Most importantly, I learned that integrity is not just about following rules or avoiding lies. Real integrity means having the courage to act according to your values, even when those actions come with a price that breaks your heart. Dad will be eligible for parole in 2 more years. Marcus still has 4 years left on his sentence. Linda moved back to her hometown in Ohio and has not responded to the letters I have sent apologizing for the pain my testimony caused her. I do not know if our family will ever heal completely from the wounds that Marcus's choices and my decisions have created. What I do know is that truth has a way of setting everyone free, even if the freedom comes with a price none of us wanted to pay. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's destruction even when they are family. Sometimes saving someone means letting them face the consequences of their choices so they can finally learn to make better ones. Have you ever been in a situation where family loyalty conflicted with doing what you knew was right? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments below what you think about my decision to tell the truth instead of protecting my family. If this story made you think about the complex nature of love and responsibility, hit that like button and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Subscribe for more real stories about the difficult choices that shape our lives. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you navigate whatever difficult decisions you might be facing in your own family relationships.